Hi, Ron. I see David Quintana is still on attendees and he should be moved to a panelist.
And Ross Buckley also.
And then who was the other one?
So we have Supervisor Perez, I
Yes.
believe is one.
Yeah,
I don't see any other committee members.
let me check with Dr. Burke because I had just spoken. He said everything was good, so I don't see him though.
I don't see Senator Delgado, Supervisor Rutherford. Only person I see is Supervisor Perez.
Yes.
And committee members. I see all the staff people on and our consultants.
Alarms account. Oh, yeah. Emails. She called.
Hey, Ron, Gary's calling in. He's calling in from a 202, and the last three ending is 307. He'll be
Okay.
calling, you know.
As soon as he comes in, we'll unmute him.
And then you want to bring up Ross, because I don't see Ross.
I just promoted Ross.
Thanks. And you got Paul Gonzalez. Yes, Paul's there.
Derek, are you putting all the consultants on the board consultants on this side as well?
No,
Okay.
So I believe we could go ahead and get started with our consultants' reports. Perhaps first we should have a explanation for any public who is attending. Do we have? Yeah, we do have some public members attending, I believe. Maybe explanation of how they make public comment. Will you do that, Derek? Or who
yes,
will-
yes. Or Ron, do you have it with you? No?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Derek?
The language for the when we start the meeting, I forgot to pull it up. Let me see if I can find it here.
I'll send it to you.
Thanks. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I forgot to pull that up.
Derek, I just sent it to you.
Okay. And then I got a note from Senator Delgado's staff that
So Dr. Burke should be there shortly. He's just entering the information. He was in the admin committee meeting.
Oh, I've done that too.
and then Senator Delgado's running about 10 minutes late. I just got an email from one of her staff, but I'll go ahead and start the reading the statement before.
All right.
Good morning. Thank you for participating in our remote meeting of the South Coast AQMD Legislative Committee meeting. We'll do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with the public participation. We ask that everyone be patient as we navigate this together. We have two formats for participation, the Zoom web application as well as teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. These are very important, so I ask that you pay close attention. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell phone or desk phone. This will ensure that we are not hearing any feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom except for board members and South Coast AQMD staff will be placed on mute by the host. That means you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. After each agenda item, the chair will announce for public comment. For Zoom, those on Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the raise hand button. This will signal to the host that you would like to provide a public comment and you will be added to the list. If you are using Zoom on your smartphone, please tap the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. For those of you calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to make a comment. Your name will be called when it is your turn to comment and the host will unmute
We
you
have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
and your line will be unmuted automatically. Please note you can hang up or leave the Zoom meeting at any time. Please adhere to speaker time limit. Please treat others with courtesy and civility and respect the public meeting process. Rules prohibiting the use of signs or posters remain in effect for video participation. Profanity, discriminatory comments, or obscene gestures is prohibited. Disorderly, unruly, or aggressive behavior that infringes upon the rights of others or disrupts the good working order of the meeting is also prohibited. Any violation of the above rules can result in your mic being muted, your video feed shut off, or you being dropped from the phone or Zoom meeting lines. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, we'll have a roll call of the committee members, please.
Ron, I see Supervisor Rutherford on the attendees list.
I've already promoted her. She's,
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Here.
Senator Delgado, Supervisor Perez,
He is here. Maybe he's muted. Yeah, he is here. He just raised his hand. Okay,
Yeah, right. I can see Supervisor.
right,
Councilmember Mitchell.
here. Okay, thank you all for attending, and we'll get right into our agenda items. The first thing we have is our federal updates. And from Carmen Group, I believe Gary Hoitzma is on the line by telephone. Gary, do you have a report for us this morning? An update on your written report, please.
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Glad to be here and welcome everyone. I want to focus my report this morning on the surface transportation reauthorization legislation in Washington. The reason we focus on that big bill is it's a potential vehicle to carry many of the clean energy, clean air type initiatives that we are most concerned about. So we're trying to follow developments on this legislation very carefully. Just quickly, on the Senate side, we have the Senate Authorizing Committee passed a bill last year that was a bipartisan bill, and it had a climate section in it that had some of the issues that we're interested in, including charging infrastructure for corridors, a carbon pollution reduction initiative with some money in it, things like that. Now, just last week, on the House side, the House introduced its version of that bill, and it came in with a much bigger clean energy section than was in the Senate bill. And it also includes the same things that were in the Senate bill, along with additional money for zero emission buses, big money for transit. It has a resiliency section. It makes combating climate change a national goal. It sets up performance measures that the states will have to meet in terms of meeting its CO2 reductions, things like that. So now the House bill is set to be marked up next week on Wednesday, and it looks like it is on track to be going to the House floor probably by July 1st or shortly thereafter, That's what the schedule looks like at this point. Now, in addition to that, we're hearing some rumblings here, rumors that the Trump administration is going to come out with its own bill with full text that could be released here in the next week to 10 days. If that were to happen, it would throw a kind of a little monkey wrench into the whole process. It might have the effect of undermining the Senate bill a little bit, which is more of a bipartisan bill. And we'll just have to see what the Trump bill would look like if that's the case. The bottom line of all this right now is that the realistic expectation going forward is that it's going to be difficult for them to find the money, and with the politics of this going into the election, it looks like they're going to have to do a short-term extension of existing programs, kind of kick this over to next year and allow the new administration, or the winning administration, if you will, after the election, to put its imprint on a long-term bill. That's sort of where we stand right now. That would be my report today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Some interesting things going on up there in Washington. Any questions for Mr. Heitzman? Not seeing anything. We'll move on to the next report from Cassidy and Associates. Amelia is on our screen. Good morning, Amelia.
Madam Chair, may I ask him a question?
Of course you can, Dr. Burke.
This is what I'm trying to ascertain is, what is the status of appointment confirmation right now in Washington?
Appointment confirmations?
Yes.
For
President?
are you just generally speaking for the administration?
Yes.
Well, things are difficult there. Again, we're getting close to the election, and it's in the interest of the Democrats to kind of stall Trump appointments at this point. And so they're doing everything they can to delay and kind of stop these appointments. So the appointment process is very slow. That doesn't mean that none are getting through. Some are getting through, but it's touch and go on that right now.
Okay, any other questions for Gary? Okay, all right, we'll move on to you, Amelia. Good morning.
Good morning. Hope you all are doing well. I wanted to take a couple minutes and give you an update on the appropriations process for fiscal year 2021. As you all know, the fiscal year ends September 30th, so Congress will need to act in some capacity to fund the government through the remainder of the year and on into 2021. The legislation which funds EPA is the Interior and Related Appropriations legislation, or Interior Bill. That's what it's frequently called. And right now, what we're looking at in the House is the House will begin subcommittee and committee markups the first 2 weeks of July, and then move those bills immediately to the floor after that. So the House will likely have appropriation bills. Their goal is to finish before the August recess. In terms of the Senate, our understanding is the Senate will begin marking up appropriations bills the week of June 22nd, but the three bills they're prioritizing do not include the Interior Bill. That's likely to come later. So that's the general timeline. We will have some indication from the House what the EPA funding levels will be, which then go on to the Clean Airshed grants and the DERA funding, hopefully before August. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Amelia? Seeing none. Thank you, Amelia. And we'll next have a report from Kadish and Associates. Mark Kadish is with us. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'll be just a quick update on 3 general topics, some that we've covered, a little bit on what we just, Amelia covered on appropriations, some on the surface transportation bill, and then on a potential COVID bill. Just to let you know what we've been doing since the report was issued. As I think some of you may know, our executive officer, Wayne Nastry, was enormously helpful. We decided we wanted to develop some additional champions for some funding for South Coast in a couple areas. The 2 major areas were the TAG program, TAG and DERA, but since TAG disproportionately advantages us, we worked with Bay Area and San Joaquin to try to get a large delegation of Californians to push the appropriators on how important that funding is for us. And Mr. Nastry reached out and talked to Congressman Lowenthal and also Congresswoman Grace Napolitano, who sits on the Transportation Committee. Both of them sit on the Transportation Committee. I'm happy to report that on the TAG letter, not only did we get support from 11 members of our delegation, but from all around, because we included San Joaquin and Bay Area, we got a diversity of Californians all pushing for additional funding for targeted airshed grants. So I think that was very helpful. And we also, I think, because of his outreach, have developed a couple of champions who now see that as important to them as well as important to us. So that was useful. On the same vein, and the surface transportation bill that Gary pointed out will be marked up next week, we've been pushing hard for a bill that Mr. DeSaulnier from Northern California has been pushing, the Clean Corridors bill, which provides grants for alternative infrastructure, $350 million over the course of the bill. And we had asked that our members on the T&I committee make clear to the chairman, Mr. DeFazio, how important it was for California, and also suggest that there were some ways to tweak it to make it more advantageous for California. All of our members actually reached out to the committee and called in. And I just got off the phone with Mr. DeSaulnier's office because of the support in the delegation, both North, South, and Central. They are going to propose to Mr. DeFazio that he make some additional changes to the bill, which would advantage us by providing some, I think, some advantage for those areas along goods movement corridors, et cetera. And then finally, we're in the process now of working on a potential, there is a potential next round of COVID funding. Obviously, the House has done their HEROES bill. We've been working on 2 elements with that. One, we've been working with Mr. Garamendi from Northern California to make sure that special districts are eligible for funding, and have reached out to him, worked with him, and he's introduced a bill with, I think, 19 co-sponsors, many from California, which would apply to us and make us eligible for funding under special districts. As you know, there's some issue about how special districts get funded, in addition to state and local governments, which is one of the holdups right now. The other thing we've been working on is if there is additional funding, we want to make sure that we put in for a large amount of money that's flexible for us. So we're continuing to work with Barbara Baird on this, as well as your team, on getting additional money for 103, 105 grants to try to plus that account up significantly in order to have some flexibility to meet some of the shortfalls we're experiencing because of the COVID crisis. We still have a ways to go on that, but we've gotten good feedback from the delegation, and we'll continue to work on that. So that's the update from our report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kadish? I'm wondering if we could get an update on the issue that you touched on, Mark, which was the identification of South Coast as a special district. There were a few little hooks and blemishes in that problem. So
That's correct. And Barbara's more expert on this, and so is Lisa than I am. But what we did was made our concern, because there are a couple different types of special districts, and we emphasized to him that we want to make sure that we would be covered in his legislation. He went back and forth with legislative counsel and has drafted it in a way that would make us eligible. So I think that worked out well, and that was really thanks to Barbara and Lisa's good work, to making it clear to them what we would need. And I think Barbara shook her head. I think we're pleased with the way that came out.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. And thank you, Barbara, for your work on that. If there aren't any questions from committee members, I'll ask if the public wants to make any comment on this agenda item. Does our host identify any public members?
We do. We have Harvey Etter.
All right. Harvey, you'll have 3 minutes. Well, you'll have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes on the whole agenda, right? So you can divide it up however you want. So
it's on the whole agenda. Okay, so that's state and federal legislation, correct?
We're on federal right now. Yeah, you've got, for all of the agenda.
Okay, well, I'm interested in commenting on state as well. So I want half of my time for both. I have a minute and a half, I guess. All right.
Set the timer for that.
Okay. For federal legislation, okay, both federal and state, we're working on a program for homelessness, solar equity. It goes back to a consulting contract with the PUC 40 years ago, the Low Income Solar Equity Program, with Commissioner Grimes, the first Black commissioner the PUC appointed, the first term of Governor Brown. Okay, there used to be a refundable low income tax credit for the state. And we need to get that both state and federal. There is a 26% this year. It's going down in a couple of years to 22. It was 30 last year. We got to get it back up to 30, especially for low and middle income. Okay. There's Homeownership Vouchers, HUD. In the end of January, the administration jumped into this with new standards. It's been on the books for 20 years. Okay. Priority goes to homeless, low income, thirds mentally ill and stuff, and substance abuse. Okay, disabled and seniors in federal legislation have no income requirements. They could be on general relief, get $100 a month, 30% is $30 a month. The rest, $1,000, $1,500 is paid by the federal government. Okay, including O&M. All right, so this needs to be done in federal legislation. And we had to use the standards back to the state here. Okay, now tax deeded property that gets sold, we have right of first refusal for homeless and low income. All right. Also, there are low income housing properties. Okay, 80-90% federal tax credit given to the well-connected.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. Your time has expired. We'll call on you when the next agenda item comes up. There's no other public comment, I understand. Is that right, Ron?
That's correct. There's no other public comment.
All right. We'll move on to agenda item 2. This is the update on our state legislative issues. And first we have, I think you pronounce this Resolute, the new name.
Resolute, yes.
Resolute. Okay, Resolute. Because of your friends, Resolute. Anyway,
I like that.
David Quintano, are you going to do the report, David?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes, I do have a couple of items that I'd like to touch on that have developed since I sent my report. The first is the budget. The legislature has put their budget forward, their two-house budget, and it has added the AB 617 that AQMD fought so hard for, that our leadership made the lobbyists get out there and work hard on. And I'd like to also give some thanks to Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia and Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia for being two real fighters for this. And the $50 million line item for AB 617 mitigation has been added back to their budget after it was cut by the governor. So I just want to say thanks to our team and to the leadership of AQMD for making sure that we got out there and fought every day for it. The second thing is that the as you all know, the governor has to sign a budget by June 15th per the Constitution, but that's not the real driver. The real driver is, will they get paid? Because an initiative said they do not get paid if they do not pass it by the 15th, or if it's not signed by the 15th. So they have been at loggerheads since the governor put his cut-laden budget proposal out there in May, and the legislature has decided to remove, I'd say, most of those cuts, and they have put forward a budget which now pretty much is a bare bones, keep the lights on budget, reinstated almost, I would say, most of what the programs the governor had decided to cut, such as our AB 617, and they are going to be sending that to the governor. They then hope, after we find out what's going to happen with the feds, if they send us the revenue, they will come back in July or August, and they will pass a budget where the houses and the governor try to work out a real deal based upon whatever we get from the feds and the tax returns in July. Here's what I'd like to put your attention on. You're going to see two budget bills out there. We have SB 808 that's currently in budget in the Senate, and then we have SB 74, which is right now in the Assembly. Those are both Senator Holly Mitchell bills. SB 74 is going to be the budget bill in chief. That's going to be the budget bill that moves over to the Senate. And SB 808, you heard me talk about a later three-party deal. That's going to be the bill that will be used for the three-party deal when the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor get together after we get the revenues and we find out what the feds will send to the state. The SB 808 is being held for that deal. So anyway, I wanted to make sure that you knew, as you follow the news, that SB 74 will be the bill that's taken up on Monday. And that's all I have, ma'am.
Great, thank you very much. That's very, very helpful information. Any questions for David? I don't see any, so I'll move on to the California Advisors Company. Ross Buckley is on the line for us. Can you give us an update, Ross?
I just wanted to make a note that I joined. This is Vanessa.
Welcome, Vanessa. Glad to see you this morning. And we're moving on to California Advisor with Ross Buckley. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. My name is Ross Buckley with California Advisors. I want to provide a brief update on state legislation today. First, I want to speak about a couple bills we've been engaged on related to backup generator use during these utility-driven public safety power shutoffs, SB 1099 and SB 1185. We've been active in setting up meetings to advocate on behalf of the Air District's interest. We've set up over a dozen meetings so far and are continuing to set up more as they move forward. During the first policy committee, our executive officer, Mr. Nastri, and CAPCOA provided lead opposition testimony at that hearing. They were joined by other air districts and some environmental groups to kind of help pile in and help voice our message and our concerns. We will continue to work on these bills as they move forward. Like I said, still a lot more meetings to have and a lot more meetings to set up. In a more broader sense, the legislature has been back working on bills for just over a month, which I can't tell if it seems like a long time or short time right now, but they've been able to get a lot of work done in just over 4 or 5 weeks so far. They were able to accomplish the first round of policy committee hearings and move fiscal bills to the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee is the big fiscal committee that acts as the filter before they move to the floor and reviews everything for state spending. As I think I mentioned at last hearing, the two appropriations chairs had said previously that they would be very mindful of new state spending, especially during these pandemic times and the hardships of the state's facing. The Assembly had their suspense hearing last week. We saw a number of bills held for state costs, but we also saw a number of bills that were amended to be contingent upon budget action or state appropriation at a later date. And this was a way to show support for a policy, but recognizing that we just don't have the money to implement this program, but we could if, state revenues turn around at a later date. Overall, there was significantly less bills set in these appropriations hearings. I think in previous years or other years, it's easy to see 300 or more bills set for these hearings. In the Assembly, just over half of that. I think there's 188 bills that were set. So you saw a pretty dramatic decrease in overall bills. That concludes my state update on legislation, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ross. Any questions for Ross? Do I see any hands raised? I do not see anything. Okay. We'll move on to Gonzalez and Sons, and I believe we have Paul Gonzalez on the line to give us an update. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. This morning, I've been asked to give a quick update on our modified legislative calendar moving forward. As we all know, the legislature adjourned for roughly 2 months during the COVID-19 epidemic, which really threw a wrench in our legislative calendar. In addition, the Assembly and the Senate both decided to resume on different weeks. They're resumed session about a week apart from each other, which has caused even more confusion going into the remaining months of our session. So I will do my best to try and clarify what our calendar looks like moving forward and some of the deadlines that we have. Obviously, Monday, June 15th, as Mr. Quintana did a good job explaining, the legislature has to pass their budget to meet the constitutional deadline. Otherwise, they will not receive their paychecks. As Ross had mentioned a little bit earlier, the Assembly had their deadlines for appropriations on June 5th, last Friday. The Senate has their appropriations deadline on June 19th, next Friday. So they're about a week off there. June 15th through 19th, the Assembly is holding floor session only, and the Senate is holding floor session only a week after, June 22nd through June 26th. The Assembly is adjourning for summer recess from June 19th to July 13th, and the Senate summer recess is July 2nd through July 13th. So the Senate is taking about a week less than the Assembly. After both houses return from their summer recess, their calendars sync back together and are on track. So August 7th is the last day to get policy bills out of committee. August 14th is the last day to get bills out of Appropriations Committee. And then August 17th through 31st is floor session only in both houses, with August 21st being the last day to amend bills on the floor. So August 31st, obviously, is the last day of session of sign or die at midnight. And September 30th is the last day for the governor to take action on any bills that are signed into law. The only thing I would add to this and to the overall discussion is, as Mr. Quintana had talked about, there's the two budget bills that, the first one being the bill that they're going to be acting on Monday, with the second bill being kind of the cleanup that happens once we find out whether or not we're going to be receiving any federal relief. Whether or not we receive enough federal relief will depend on whether or not we see special sessions come the fall. Back when Schwarzenegger was in the horseshoe, we saw many special sessions on the budget, some in November, some in February. And I could most likely see something like this happening again if we don't get the relief from the federal government that we're expecting. So that's it for my report this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? I don't see any hands raised. So we do have a public comment. I know that Harvey Etter wants to speak on the state legislative issues. So Mr. Etter.
Okay, good morning. My name is Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition and 80–90% of the citizens, voters that support equitable, just transition immediately to solar. To deal with our climate crisis, our environmental crisis, air pollution on steroids. This virus is climate. It's and I'm incorporating comments made by Dr. Birkin years ago that everything I'm saying is copyright in reference to comments made about solar is the biggest transition since slavery, culturally and human society. All right. I want to incorporate a Senate bill. I'm not sure if it's 917 or 937. Scott Wiener, who's head of the Housing Committee. Okay. Recently, there's this Judge Carter in federal court. They've been sued, and they went after air pollution stuff that I brought up in committees and stuff. That those folks on the street are dying from air pollution. That half of the death numbers of 1,000 a year about from air pollution. And Judge Carter ordered this. Okay, so this is in play, and it has to do directly. Okay, now they're talking about taking over PG&E. A third of their users, 5 million people, with the state and 22 cities and counties. And this has to also be expanded to everything that's happening with climate now and societal change. We've got 10 years to change or less, incorporating everything from Davos, Greta,
Thank you very much, Mr. Etter. Your time has expired. And so we will move on to is there anyone else who has public comment before we move on? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. We'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the update on legislation regarding the voting district authorization. And we'll have a report from Derek Alatorre on that. Go ahead, Derek.
Derek, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Madam Chair.
You were muted.
Excuse me?
It was better when you were muted.
All right, this meeting needs to come to order again.
So getting back to the matter at hand, the agenda item, there's really no update. You know, the voter district authorization bill, the spot bill that we've talked about, it didn't get become a full bill. So we're still looking at other avenues to try to get funding in the future, whether it be next year, another bill, or you know, continue to fight for funding at the state level. But we're still open to trying to find the funding that we need to meet attainment by 2023. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Derek on this issue from our committee? Anybody? Okay, seeing none. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none. Okay. We have several action items on a few bills that our staff has put forward. The first of those is AB 2882, and we have a report from Philip Crabb on that bill. Philip, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. AB 2882 by Assemblymember Chu is sponsored by the Bay Area AQMD and would require charter and private schools to follow the same requirements as public schools for evaluating a school site for potential hazardous substances, emissions, or waste. The bill would also require the evaluation of a potential charter school site to follow the same CEQA process used for public school. It's important that the potential school site, regardless whether the school is public or private or a charter school, be properly evaluated with the same health and safety requirements to prevent it from being built at an unsafe location, thus protecting the health and well-being of all students and school employees. This bill is consistent with South Coast AQMD policy priorities to protect public health, especially within disadvantaged communities, and to promote environmental justice. However, this bill does appear to require that private or charter school sites that involve leased property that does not actually have it abide by the applicable public school siting and CEQA requirements. Thus, South Coast AQMD offers a friendly suggestion that the bill be amended to clarify that the same siting and CEQA requirements that apply to public schools also apply to private and charter schools located on leased sites. So staff recommends a support position on this bill.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Crabb on this? Okay. Let me ask if I need to call for a public comment on each of these or just at the end. Maybe.
I would suggest each one.
Each one, okay.
Each one, they're separate agenda items. Thank you.
All right, then let's see if there's any public comment on AB 2882. No, I see nothing. Okay. Then committee members, any discussion on this item? Staff recommends a support position. So I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move approval.
We have Dr. Burke moving approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
Second from Senator Delgado. Thank you. And a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Aye.
Senator Delgado,
Yes.
Supervisor Perez,
You need to unmute Senator Supervisor Perez.
I believe he's having some audio issues, but he's saying yes.
You see a visual yes? Okay.
Supervisor Rutherford? Yes. Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item is AB 3256. This is a bill by Eduardo Garcia, and Mr. Crabb will give us the report on this one.
Yes, thank you. This bill proposes the Economic Recovery, Wildfire Prevention, Safe Drinking Water, Drought Preparation, and Flood Protection Bond Act of 2020, and proposes the issuance of a $6.98 billion general obligation bond to implement its provisions, which would be subject to voter approval at the November 3rd, 2020 statewide general election. This bill represents an opportunity to generate much needed air quality incentive funding that would help reduce criteria pollutant and toxic air contaminant emissions, protect public health, and facilitate attainment of federal air quality standards within the South Coast. Thus, staff recommends amendments to the bill that propose that $500 million be made available to fund local air district administered projects to mitigate the impacts of climate change on air quality by reducing greenhouse gas, toxic, and criteria pollutant emissions. Air districts would use the funding generated for projects pursuant to programs including the Carl Moyer program, clean truck incentives per Prop 1B guidelines, and other incentive programs that reduce air pollution, with priority for projects in disadvantaged communities. So accordingly, staff recommends a support if amended position on this bill.
All right, any questions of Mr. Crabb about the bill? So I do have a question, Philip. One of the things that we could consider, and I'd like your thoughts on this, was to include not just the allocation to the Air Resources Board, but a further clarification on how the funds then are allocated among the air districts. With the Carl Moyer monies, a certain percentage goes to South Coast, a certain percentage to the other air districts. And I believe South Coast gets around 43% out of that, but it clarifies how the money actually gets allocated. What is your opinion about including that in the amended language that we propose?
That has been previously done in the budget bill that was done a few years ago, where there was an allocation in the law. And then the subsequent last 2 years, it's been more of a lump sum provided statewide to be decided by CAPCO and CARB, I guess, in conjunction. So it'd be at the board's pleasure, committee's pleasure.
I know that we were disappointed in the allocation of the farmer funds. We hardly got any money from that particular fund, even though we have fairly large agricultural section out in the Coachella Valley. So that was, I think, one of the concerns that's on this side of that funding. I would appreciate any comments from our committee members on the issue and how they would feel about adding that into this amendment.
You're absolutely right about it. You know, every time we don't get it in the legislation, we get taken advantage of. So, you know, I would not be opposed to supporting a motion that would say oppose unless amended. And with the amendment that the specifics on the distribution of the money be in the bill. Because every time we go in the big machine, we come out on the bottom of the deal. And even though in that situation where we get 43%, it actually should be 49%. But, you know, better 43 than 33, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
That's my opinion.
Any other discussion, comments on this issue?
Supervisor Perez has his hand raised.
Barbara?
Yeah, point of clarification. Dr. Burke, was that a substitute motion that you were making?
I didn't know there was a motion on the floor.
There was, I believe.
No, there is no motion on the floor. The recommendation from staff.
Just recommendation.
Amended, and
Never mind.
I
So
raised
that's
the issue before any motion was made. I'm just exploring possibilities here. So,
my apologies.
Madam Chair.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, what is your motion?
My motion is that we oppose unless amended with specific languages to the distribution of the funds.
And the first part of that amendment was to include in the bill that $500 million goes to the California Air Resources Board, because there was no money in the bill that actually was allocated for air quality. So there's two parts to this.
Yes,
I
I'll
assume.
put that part in my motion.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Supervisor Perez was trying to speak earlier, but we think he may be having microphone. Supervisor, we can't hear you.
Supervisor Delgado or Perez?
Perez, I'm sorry.
Supervisor Perez.
Supervisor, we'll call you.
Maybe you can call in and have an audio on a call, get it on the video.
Madam Chair, I had a question really. So the motion is to oppose if not amended. Could we do what we had in the last one and support if amended? Because I think the concept is that we want this to move forward, but we want them to specify the funding, you know, coming to our agency, right? I mean, or do we just oppose? We wouldn't oppose this, right, if it didn't get amended?
That's a question for the committee.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. There is currently no air quality money in the bond, the proposed bond. So this, the support if amended original proposal would be to add in air quality funding. And if we wanted to go ahead and specify, you know, how much our agency gets, we could possibly include that as part of the that amendment. That would be the.
Phil, so we got zero going, right?
Correct.
Why would we support it at all?
The support if amended position means we only would support it if they add.
That. Why would I support it if I'm getting screwed out of all the money?
Dr. Burke, could I maybe add a comment to that? Assemblyman Garcia has been a tremendous ally to us. And I think that if we spoke with him and offered the amendment, he would give it serious consideration. And given all that he's done for us, I would be reluctant to oppose something of this nature. And I think we could talk with him about this, or his staff.
I agree. It seems a very dramatic step to oppose something instead of just being neutral about it or just not opining. But if staff is recommending that they include a component for us, and I appreciate the chairwoman's request to further define it for AQMD, I like all that. But I'd rather be on the support if amended or just not doing anything instead of directly opposing. That's fit. It's just, I don't think we have to do that.
And let me say that Eduardo Garcia sits on the Air Resources Board with me. He's a legislative appointment. He's a non-voting member, but he has been a real champion of air quality issues. And, you know, one of the authors of AB 617, I think we do have a good relationship with him. And I think it is important to preserve that. And I would recommend a support if amended position as well, rather than do oppose it.
My motion to support with amended.
Okay, all right, we'll move in that direction. So now we have the maker of the original motion has amended the motion to be a support if amended, and including the comments that we made about how it should be amended. Any further discussion? Okay, is there any public comment on the item? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the motion. And do we have a second? We have, Dr. Burke made the motion. Did I get a second from somebody?
I did.
Senator Delgado. Okay, all right. We'll go call for a roll call on this.
Madam Chair, could I just ask you to restate the motion one more time?
Support if amended.
Thank you.
Do you need further clarification?
No, I'm good. I had to step away for a second. I didn't know where we'd ended up.
All right. Okay, right. Okay, so we'll ask for a roll call, please.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Senator Delgado,
Yes.
Supervisor Perez,
Is Supervisor
There we go. Yes.
indicating yes? Okay.
Supervisor Rutherford,
No.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-1.
thank you. Okay, the next one is a report on SB 895, and Mr. Crabb has that report as well.
Yes. So SB 895 by Senator Archuleta would require the California Energy Commission, within the limits of available funds, to provide technical assistance and support for the development of zero-emission fuels, zero-emission fueling infrastructure, and zero-emission fuel transportation technologies. Specifically, SB 895 would allow the CEC to allocate monies in the Diesel Emission Reduction Fund, currently just under $5 million, to zero-emission fuel projects, rather than to originally authorize clean diesel projects. Since the CEC no longer funds clean diesel development as a policy, the change would allow the CEC to utilize these funds for their intended purpose of spurring development of emission-reducing transportation fuel and technologies. This bill is in line with South Coast AQMD's policy priorities to protect public health and reduce mobile sources of pollution by promoting clean vehicle technology. And it would help support with the efforts to attain federal air quality standards. So staff recommends a support position on this bill.
Any questions for Mr. Crabb on this bill? Okay, I don't see any questions. Is there any discussion that you'd like to bring up at this time before I go to public comment? Seeing none, we have one public commenter. Who is that?
That's Harvey Etter.
But has he utilized his entire time for the agenda already?
Yes.
His 3 minutes? That's correct, right? So unfortunately, Harvey, we cannot hear from you unless my committee is willing to make an exception here to allow you to speak. Any comments?
I don't mind if he wants to speak, but
Yeah, my tendency is to favor public discussion. If it's if there's public that wants to speak, I'll let Harvey have 1.5 minutes. Go ahead, Harvey.
Under protest, Harvey Etter speaking for self and PSPC. Transportation fuels. You folks are pushing natural gas for all your trucks and stuff. Okay, methane's a big problem. Okay, not just CO2, it's CO2 equivalent on all legislation, federal and state. The real numbers, and we're whistleblowers, are 2-3 times what y'all are using, and you know it. All right, the methane is way up there, and nitrous oxide 300 times has been ignored. The Arctic is melting. All right, these numbers were not included in IPCC. Solar. Okay, now I heard that Ranji talk about he lauds the fuel cells. Okay, hydrogen has water. Water vapor is a climate emitter. All right, these have to be studied and evaluated. Also, heat engines have never been looked at, as far as I know, really for transportation. Okay, so there's some basic stuff here that's got to be looked at as well. And along with the control issues, political, economic, social, cultural, etc. There's a propensity here. I took an anthropology class, and we call ourselves not just Homo sapiens, which means wise humans, but Homo sapiens sapiens, wise. Now, if that isn't hubris, I don't know what the hell is. We've got to get perspective and take action and deal with the real world. Both Greta and Biden says we want the real numbers, the real stuff. With the virus and all this stuff, climate, we can handle it. Okay, we need the real numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Etter. Your time has expired, and we will move on to a position on this bill. Staff recommends support. I'll entertain a motion on the bill.
Move staff recommendation.
Buscaino makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Is that Senator Delgado with the second? Okay, and roll call, please.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Senator Delgado,
Yes.
Supervisor Perez, Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other matters to come before the committee this morning? Seeing none. Is there any public comment in general that it does not involve an item that we've discussed on the agenda? I do not see anyone coming forward. Okay. Our next meeting will be Friday, August 14th, and I wish you all a good weekend. Thank you for joining in this morning.
Thank you all. Thank you.
I do see one hand raised for, oh, is that a panelist or an attendee? Sorry.
That was it.
Harvey Etter raised his hand for public comment.
Oh, we did. Okay, I didn't see it up there. So shall we allow Harvey one more comment period? I'll reopen the meeting for Harvey's public comment in general. Go ahead, Harvey.
Hello, I'm Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition, etc. et al. I want to talk about homelessness, low income. I want to incorporate today's LA Times on the cover article about homelessness setting up an entity in the county. Okay, I've been homeless 10% of my life. I'm over 70. I got hurt working a long time ago, okay? I know that the Wessons have got a son that's been homeless, and he's off the streets now for the last half a year and doing well, okay? There is a litigation going on. The county city's being sold by an Alliance for Human Rights. Nobody's looking at home ownership. That's what we want. Okay, that's been out there for 20 years, the Homeownership Voucher, Section 8. The city and county's doing nothing on this. It's just garbage, all right? It has to be made a priority. They say that 1,000 deaths a year, and this Judge Carter, who was a wounded non-vet, and he's about 75, he could have been out there too, and he had trouble rehabbing, okay? So this has to be done. I've been trying to get into negotiation, trying to get a hold of legal aid, and the district has got to go on this. They said that 7,000 people off the streets by freeways and roads because air pollution. Okay, I brought this up to these committees and to this district many times, and it has to be looked at. And that's $9 million per death premature cost to society. 1,000 deaths is $9 billion per year. And according to the Zika virus, 1 million times 1 million.
Thank you, Mr. Etter. Your time has expired, and I will now adjourn the meeting to Friday, August 14th, and wish you all a good weekend. Thank you all. Bye-bye.